The infirmary on Halcyon Drift Station was designed to feel like nothing bad could ever happen there, which is exactly why the fear felt so loud. Everything was white and curved and humming softly, med printers whispering in the walls, air filtered so clean it almost tasted sweet, but tonight the calm was a lie stretched thin over panic. Dr. Cale Oren stood outside the sliding door with his scanner half raised and realized, with professional horror, that he was hesitating to enter a room. He had walked into triage bays filled with screaming soldiers, treated vacuum exposure, venom crystallization, neural burns, things that rewrote the definition of pain, but he had never treated tension itself. The room ahead of him felt like a coiled muscle. Through the glass he could see them. 6 juvenile Veri clustered around a recovery bed in perfect formation, not random children clinging in fear but a deliberate wall of small bodies placed with the instinctive discipline of a guard unit. On the bed lay the human engineer, Lena Cross, barely conscious, chest wrapped in regenerative foam that pulsed faintly blue where a plasma scorch had torn across her ribs. The wound wasn't just severe, it was mathematically wrong. Veri plasma burns were efficient, they erased problems. Humans, Cale had learned in the most frustrating way possible, did not accept erasure as a final answer. What froze him in the doorway wasn't that she was alive. It was the cubs. Their ears were pinned flat, shoulders high, eyes unblinking. They tracked his smallest movement like targeting software. At the foot of the bed stood the eldest, a narrow-shouldered boy with fur still soft with youth and fangs bared in silent warning. Cale lowered his voice instinctively. "I'm going to check her vitals," he whispered, and the boy's throat produced a low vibration that crawled through the floor panels. Lena's eyelids fluttered. Her voice scraped out dry as dust. "Rin, stand down." The boy didn't move. His stare stayed locked on the scanner in Cale's hand. Lena swallowed, winced, and tried again, softer. "He's helping." A smaller cub pressed against her leg and hissed a sound the translator couldn't categorize, something learned, something emotional and sharp. Cale knew pack behavior. He'd studied social bonding across half a dozen systems. He knew protective clustering, trauma imprinting, the way young minds latched onto a center when fear burned hot enough. But the Veri were diplomats, archivists, cultural mediators. Their children weren't supposed to look like this. These looked like cubs who had chosen a line in the sand. He stepped forward once. 6 bodies shifted in perfect sync. A living barricade. He stopped. A new voice spoke behind him, calm authority wrapped in velvet. "They won't let her be alone." Administrator Sol Varen stood in the doorway, hands open, posture deliberately unthreatening. His ceremonial bands glinted under the lights and meant absolutely nothing to the cubs, who angled themselves between him and the bed anyway. Cale exhaled slowly. "This isn't normal." "No," Sol said quietly. "What happened wasn't normal." Cale's scanner pinged from a distance. Lena's vitals were stable by a miracle and a stubborn refusal to die. Microfractures spidered through her shoulder. Calcium depletion. Shock damage. "How are you alive?" he asked. Lena's mouth twitched. Didn't feel like quitting. One cub's ears twitched at her voice, checking, verifying she was still there. Sol stepped closer and stopped when the wall of fur tensed. "The breach was in Habitat Ring C," he said softly. "During an evacuation drill." Cale frowned. "A drill." Sol's jaw tightened. It became real. A radar cell cut through the external hatch. They ignored weapons. Ignored comms. Went straight for the shelter rooms. Cold spread through Cale's stomach. "Why?" Sol's eyes flicked to the cubs. "Because young Veri sell well." The room sharpened with a collective intake of breath. Lena's fingers twitched under the blanket and every cub leaned in instantly, a synchronized pulse of attention. "She heard them," Cale said quietly. Sol nodded. "She came back from shift. No armor. No escort. Just her." Lena's voice floated up, half dreaming. "They were crying." Sol continued, voice low with something like awe. "She used a plasma cutter like a hammer. Then she grabbed a security rifle meant for someone twice her mass. The recoil should have shattered her spine. Lena murmured. Almost did. She held the corridor, Sol said. She didn't retreat. She put herself between them and the door. Kale stared at the wound again and understood the geometry of sacrifice written into the burn. You should be screaming, he whispered. Lena cracked one eye open. I am. Just. Internally. A chime cut through the air. The door slid open and the fragile calm shattered as Lieutenant Dresk of station security strode in with the volume of a battlefield. Administrator, we've confirmed. He never finished. The cubs exploded into motion, not chaos but precision. Rin lunged forward, placing his body squarely between Dresk and the bed. Another cub scrambled onto the mattress, claws digging into fabric. The rest formed a tight arc, heads low, teeth bared, a chorus of warning that vibrated in the bones. Dresk froze mid-step, hands up. Sol snapped, lower your voice. The lieutenant obeyed instantly. The cubs eased a fraction. Kale's mind raced. They're reacting to sound, he realized. Lena lifted a trembling hand and brushed Rin's shoulder. It's okay, she rasped. He didn't mean it. The boy didn't retreat, but his stance softened by a hair. Sol crouched slowly to their level. Young ones, he murmured. Lena Cross needs quiet to heal. A tiny cub chirped once like a vote. Rin spoke, voice thin but steady. She stood in front. The translator rendered it perfectly. Bad ones came. She did not move. She got hurt so we didn't. Lena's throat tightened. I had to, she whispered. Rin's claws flexed. Then we have to. The words settled into the room like law. Over the following days the station adapted to orbit that single bed. People learned to walk softer near the infirmary. Laughter in the corridor died quickly when 6 small silhouettes appeared in the doorway, bristling until the offender retreated in embarrassed silence. Dresk, once the loudest presence on Halcyon Drift, became a man who spoke in careful murmurs. Physical therapy became a ritual. When Lena strained to lift her arm, teeth clenched, the cubs mirrored her, tiny paws rising in solidarity. When her hand shook, theirs shook. When she succeeded, they chirped in triumph like they'd conquered a star. Weeks later a docking alarm announced an incoming transport. Sol stood beside the bed. They're here, he said gently. The cubs stiffened, not with fear but readiness. The door opened and 6 adult Vari rushed in carrying exhaustion and relief in equal measure. The reunion was a storm of soft touches and broken sounds that needed no translation. Then hesitation crept in. Rin's mother reached for him. You've done well, she whispered. Come back. Rin planted his feet. No, she blinked. Rin. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She stood in front. We stand in front. Lena's eyes burned. She tried to explain she wasn't Pac, just a human who made a choice in a hallway, but the cubs looked at her like titles were irrelevant. Sol spoke quietly. They saved each other. Lena swallowed hard. I didn't. Rin stepped close, no threat left in him, only certainty. You did. You got hurt. So we learned. Learned what? She whispered. His answer was simple. Pac remembers. Years later, station records would list Lena Cross as an engineer, survivor, and unofficially the only human on Halcyon Drift with a permanent Vari escort. The cubs grew into officers, navigators, scholars. They traveled systems and built lives, but whenever Lena was present the station followed one rule without needing to write it down. No one raised their voice near her. Not once. Because somewhere in the room a pack that remembered would turn their heads in perfect unison, eyes calm but unmovable, and the entire station would remember too. And if this story hooked you the way it hooks me every time I tell it, subscribe to the channel right now because this is where the best human versus the universe sci-fi lives, and trust me, the next story only gets bigger.